Last week, President Trump assembled tens of leaders of countries, foreign ministers, and one FIFA president for the inaugural meeting of the Board of Peace. True, the meeting was filled with flattery, but also with substance, as one country after another pledged to donate money, troops, or support to the Board of Peace and its effort to rebuild a new Gaza. While the Board of Peace signifies, peace, winds of war also reached the Middle East, with the USS Ford entering the region and the leaders of the United States and Iran exchanging rhetorical blows. However, it seemed like diplomacy is still an option, as the US and Iran are set to meet in Geneva on Thursday. Whether the United States is going to attack Iran or not, Israel did attack Hezbollah, Iran's proxy in Lebanon. According to reports, this was a more significant strike than those we witnessed in recent months. Hello everyone, this is Brief.IL, a weekly dive into the events shaping Israel's national security. My name is Ofir Dayan. I'm a researcher here at the Institute focusing on anti-Semitism and delegitimization. And here with me in the studio is Reserve Major General Tamir Hayman, former Chief of IDF Military Intelligence and today the Executive Director of the INSS, the Institute for National Security Studies. This is Brief.IL. Let's begin. Hi, Tamir.
Hi, Ofir.
So let's start with what we've all been seeing on our social media. The USS Ford is being photographed from every angle entering our region. We saw it in Cyprus, in Greece, even where I live in Haifa, people took pictures of the USS Ford. But at the same time, there is still a meeting planned between Iranian and American leaders in Geneva this Thursday. So what can we make of these mixed messages? What is really happening?
First of all, let's clarify the schedule. Okay, there's the response of the Iranians to the proposal of the recent cycle of discussions should be delivered today to Oman.
And today is Tuesday.
Tuesday by Larijani, the head of the National Security Council of Iranian, and he will then give the answer, the formal answer of the Iranian regime to the proposal of the recent discussion. Then it will be transformed from the Omanis to the Americans, to Witkoff and Kushner, that are on the way right now to Europe, to Geneva. They will examine this response and will decide whether there's a point in even making the next round of discussions on Thursday. So there's a potential scenario that there's not going to be a next round of discussion, because if the maximum concessions done by Iranians are not meeting the minimum demands by the Americans, there's really not point on meeting on Thursday, and we are approaching an escalation and decision making regarding what's going to happen in terms of operational activity. So that's where we are right now. The next 2 days are crucial in the decision. As for the military dimension, the United States has deployed 2 striking groups, one in front of Israel, and one in front of in the Gulf of the Arabian Gulf, the Persian Gulf. Those 2 strikes and other deployment of aerial capabilities on land bases in Jordan, in Greece, in Italy, all across the Middle East, consist of the largest striking capabilities gathered in the Middle East since 2003. It seems like the US military doesn't really know what the mission will be yet, because it is not yet decided by Trump. And it spreads capability that can endure any surprises done by Trump. If Trump decides on an attrition war for a few months, they can provide it. A very condensed strike to conduct some form of a shock and awe operation constrained to 2 or 3 days with maximum capabilities from all across, they can do that as well. And I think and assume that there is right now these various plans of options that are planned, and when Trump gets to or decides to act, he will choose from all across the buckets, the different buckets of potential operational activity, and we choose the best for him. And there are rumors. We are all in this huge confusion and chaos of rumors, of dates, of scales. Minimum there will be a symbolical attack. Yesterday, Monday evening, there were rumors that Trump decided on a symbolical attack. Then later on in the evening, he claimed it's just fake news and it's not really changed and decided yet. So we're going to wait a while. That's the Trump world we're living in. We can take comfort from the knowing that it's the same in the military aspect of the American military. They are also in a waiting position and don't know where they are headed.
So you're saying that all those people who took pictures of soldiers eating pies and saying that this is a sign for war is not true.
It's not true. We are in the middle of a strategic messaging and a negotiation dynamics where all you see above ground are just strategic messaging, psychological warfare, trying to influence the other side's decision making, and what's really happening, nobody knows. It's behind the scenes. It's something that will be uncovered just in retrospect.
Someone very smart told me everyone who knows what's going to happen is silent right now, and those who speak don't know what's going to happen.
And nobody knows.
Exactly.
And nobody knows.
And you know, yesterday on Channel 12 News in Israel, you said something very interesting, that there's a third option maybe of a blockade. So if you can elaborate on that.
I'm trying to convey this message because I'm worried that President Trump is being cornered by his advisors into a dichotomy between a bad deal and a bad strike. And from his perspective, maybe a bad deal he will be somehow convinced that it's not just such a bad deal. I think from the Israeli interest, any deal right now that relieves sanctions of Iran is a bad deal.
And that's the gist of a deal.
Sorry?
And that's the core idea of a deal, to relieve the sanctions.
So that's, on the other aspect, the political base of Trump and the right-wing supporters, Tucker Carlson as an example of a radical, I don't know how to label him. He's a very...
Let's be gentle, isolationist.
Okay, and he criticized Trump of betraying election promises, that he will not be involved in a war.
Right.
And the second was, so it might lead Trump to end up with a strike that doesn't really achieve anything, just something symbolical in the scale of American symbolism. So I try to convey that there's a third option. Don't do a strike that is efficient, and don't go do a bad deal. Partial blockade. Maintain deployment as a loaded gun, straightly aiming to the head of the Iranian regime, but not pulling the trigger yet. Enforce the sanctions physically, not just through financial matter. If you are insisting that they will not be exporting oil, block oil shipments of crude oil. If there's unallowed, unapproved means that are being imported by Iranians, block them as well. That will suffocate the Iranian economy. And the fact that there's still this bubbling of riots, of criticism and disapproval of this regime inside the Iranian can be enforced by that kind of measures that may increase the potentials of another cycle of violence or something erupting inside. And eventually we all know that that's the way those regimes are falling, from internal momentum, and we should support the Iranian people by doing that. So that's a third option. I will be more than happy with a very, very elaborated strike that will eliminate the supreme leader and change the regime. That's the best options. But if that's not available, there's a third option.
And how long can the U.S. blockade Iran like that? Like, it has to use its, military capabilities elsewhere in the world as well.
Endlessly, because 2 striking groups out of 11, that they can rotate. It's only a matter of attention. It's only a matter of money, basically. And those out of 11 striking groups, 9 are operational. The money is being spent elsewhere in the world. Okay, it's only a matter of priorities. So potentially, that's what's unique in the United States. There might, in terms of global power projections, can enforce that as long as they want.
And last question about this, because I do want to move on, but I think it's interesting because this idea is maybe something that our listeners would not hear anywhere else because it's kind of a novel idea. So how do you think that countries in the Middle East will respond to such a blockade? Because we know that Saudi Arabia was against a military strike in Iran. Would it be more happy with a solution like that?
Saudi Arabia can be inflicted if, in response to such a blockade, Iranian will somehow disrupt the Hormuz Straits by not totally blocking the Hormuz Straits. They don't have the capability to do that, but they can interfere. They can create obstacles, and that will affect the oil export of the Saudi Arabians, and they are terrified of that idea. And so, in that case, that will be criticized. Secondly, and that's the negative aspect of a blockade, it will influence the civilians in Iran.
Right.
Okay, those who protest against the government of Iran cannot be isolated from the general economic pressure. And that will be considered as a collateral punish. Mm-hmm. And that will be also criticized by Arab nations. That's the price you pay for blockade. That is why...
And perhaps even by UN or
exactly. Other difficult. It seems we should... That's why I'm insisting on partial blockade.
Right.
Okay? We do not... A full blockade will create even starvation. Okay? Although it's a huge country and it has capabilities internally to supply all of the calories that the 90 million people of Iran demands. It's a huge country. They are not relying on external import in order to feed the people. But partial blockade, strictly on sanctions approved by UN. It's legal, and it's eventually it's a third option.
I think it's a very interesting option that is not currently in the cycle of options that we're talking about. But let's go back for a second to the negotiations. So you said that for Israel, no deal would be good because it relieves sanctions of Iran. But it seems like there's divergence in, even the topics discussed. The Iranian foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, said this week that they're not talking proxies, they're not talking about the ballistic missiles, and he even said that they might be able to get away with peaceful, quote-unquote, enrichment of uranium inside Iran. What does Trump want to see in that response that Iran is set to send today? What is he looking for in terms of concessions from Iran?
If Iranians' response will be that they are accepting zero enrichment, Trump may see that as a huge success. Okay? But Iranians will not give that for free. They will condition it, I think, in two other conditions. One, that they will receive some kind of declaration by the United States that principally Iran has the right to enrich uranium like all sovereign superpowers, etc., etc. Although they are willing to postpone that right or not to fully implement that right, but it should be written that generally 5-6 years from now, they have the right to enrich on Iranian soil. Secondly, the enrichment on Iranian soil may be conducted by an international consortium that kind of create this enriched uranium regional bank that provides enriched uranium for civilian purposes for all across the Middle East, and Iran is the base for that activity. So that if they will respond in that manner, it is a better deal than the Obama deal, as Trump puts it in mind. So that
But that's still a bad deal for Israel because it doesn't address the ballistic missiles and it doesn't address the proxies.
And the main issue is, how do you understand the Iranian regime? If you believe, like myself, which maybe I'm biased, that the Iranian regime has a purpose of destroying the state of Israel because it considers the existence of Israel as a sovereign state for Jews in the Middle East as something that contradicts the history, philosophy of how Persians look at the Middle East. The mere existential being of Israel contradicts something religious, something fundamental in the way that the Iranian perceives themselves. So in my opinion, any kind of a lifeline, in the unique context we are now, is bad. If you would ask me the same question, but in a different context, where Iranians are on the brink of a nuclear weapon and we cannot destroy it in a military manner, I would say a nuclear Iran is much more dangerous than the Iranian regime existence. So it's better accept the Iranian regime without a nuclear bomb. It's the lesser evil solution. But that's not the context we are discussing right now. There's not a nuclear ongoing project. We have already delayed it in the 12 days war.
So whether or not this negotiations succeed or fail, Iran is not going to be the only party to this conflict that is affected by the negotiations. We know that Iran's proxies, Hezbollah, the Houthis, to a lesser extent Hamas, are going to be highly influenced by the results of these negotiations. So how do you see end goals of these negotiations influencing each of these proxies?
I agree. The Iranians will will reject even discussing about the proxies. Okay, they will. That's the way they are handling their funding of Shiite all across the world. It seems to be, in their perspective, that's the way of protecting the Shiites all across. Shiites are a minority section in Islam, and they will even make the comparison to Israel. Okay. As if the way that Israel perceives itself as guardians of the Jews in the diaspora and have some responsibility on the safety of Jews, they are having some form of responsibility on the Shiite presence all across the Middle East. And their means how to defend those minority Shiite groups all around the world, that's not of your business. That's their business. That's their perception of an entity that controls globally the safety of Shiites all across the world, and that's why they have this is allegedly the purpose of the Shiite militias, to defend Shiite. Of course, it's nonsense. In the Middle East, the purpose of the Shiite proxies is eventually to threaten Israel, to reflect power projections by the Iranian, to deter entities or to deter Israel from striking. That's the purpose.
And also they fund militias that are not Shia.
Yes,
Hamas.
support them in the struggle against Israel. But so that's one. Secondly, in terms of preparation to the next war or escalation, the lessons learned, apparently, by open source information only, it seems like one of the lessons learned from the 12 days war by the Iranian is that they failed on harnessing this regional power projection to defend the Iranians and to diminish the level of friction with Israel. It's a huge failure. The fact that no proxy helped them in what was some form of a crucial escalation with Israel and United States. And they are insisting that will not be the case in the next round. So they are working intensively behind the scene in order to harness, in order to ensure that Houthis in Yemen, the militias in Iraq, and Hezbollah in Lebanon will work against Israel. So if we can analyze that, Houthis are not that hard to convince. Right. They are coded for violence. They are the basic statues of their existence is achieving violence and trying to inflict pain to Israel, and their position in the Gulf states near Bab el-Mandeb Strait can present a forward deployment missile capabilities that can threaten potentially the U.S. presence in the sea.
But they did reach some sort of agreement with the U.S. last year when President Trump said, we will stop attacking the Houthis because they said that they don't want to fight anymore. I'm not counting that will hold on in the current context when the Iranians are approaching him and ask them to defend Iran by striking Americans who aggressively, according to Iranian, attacked Iran unprovoked. Secondly, Iraq. Iraq is a major problem for the Iranians because all of those militias are from, I think, 7 years ago, entered under the umbrella of the Iraqi army. Although they are separate militias, Shiite militias, they are a part of the former Iraqi army. So if they will work against Israel, it's like the Iraqi have launched war against America. That's a threat that the Iraqi government will not take. Mm-hmm. But striking Israel is an option. Right.
So they will probably be somehow involved. Hezbollah is the most interesting of all. highly criticized inside Lebanon, under huge pressure to not escalate with Israel because they have just recovered, even not recovered, but they are still licking the wounds of the former confrontation with Israel that inflicted lots of damage on the state of Lebanon, of course, destroyed much of the strategic capabilities of Hezbollah. So they are, in one hand, pressured by the Iranian to strike Israel. On the other hand, pressured by the Lebanese government and other European countries and the international community not to escalate with Israel. So they might end up with just striking Americans in Lebanon. And that's what behind the evacuation.
But their allegiance is more towards Iran than it is to the Lebanese government.
It's a matter of capabilities. If they would have still be keeping, or their might, the military capabilities, they will be more subjected to Iranian pressure. But they are weak. So once you are weak, you are less tempted to provoke something that will expose your weakness. So that's another element that diminishes their willing to go all the way against Israel. But still, let me be very clear. We don't know. They might end up striking Israel, although it's against the interest of the Lebanese government. And although they know that they are entering into ambush, because Israel has already planned a massive strike against what left from Hezbollah in Lebanon. And it's Israel really waiting for an excuse to launch that very massive strike. So they probably know that if they will invoke something, if they will strike Israel, Israel will see that as an opportunity to finish something that's really on the agenda.
So Israel is not taking any risk, and we saw Israel attacking Hezbollah positions in Lebanon in the past week. It seems like, at least from open source intelligence, that these strikes were more significant than things that we saw in the last couple of weeks or month. Why did Israel attack Hezbollah now? What are we trying to prevent them to do?
First of all, if you zoom out and see the overall trend of Israel's strike in Lebanon, it is escalating without any connection to the situation in Iran. It seems like a month and a half ago, Israel planned this very huge strike in order to diminish the fourth generation of Hezbollah. And instead of doing that, because of the friction with Iran, it is slowly increasing the volume and the intensity of strike against Hezbollah all across Lebanon. That's not connected. It is the general trend. What we see recently is something directly connected to the missile capabilities, whatever left of the strategic missile capabilities of Hezbollah. And we know that Iranians messengers from the IRGC were sent to Hezbollah in order to coordinate a response of a future potential strikes on Iran. So that was behind one of the strikes we saw in the upper Lebanese Bekaa Valley. There are, of course, other strikes against Hamas presence, which are connected to the situation in Gaza. That's a different type. But you see, Ofir, that's the tragedy of Lebanon. A ruined country that occupied by foreign entities that works against Israel and forces Israel to destroy and to act against Lebanon.
And the Lebanese civilians end up suffering.
Exactly.
And you briefly mentioned Hamas, and I do want to touch on that. According to reports, in this wave of strikes, Israel also attacked some Hamas positions. What is Hamas trying to do in Lebanon? Maybe rebuild there instead of the things that were ruined in Gaza during the war? What is the aim, and how could Israel respond to those attempts?
The presence of Palestinians in Lebanon is a potential for Hezbollah to rebuild what they've lost in the war, which is the invasion capabilities to Israel, the ground invasion.
The October 7th of the North.
This type of October 7th. Conducting this very large scale of operation was destroyed by Israel. The mere capabilities are gone, and the legitimacy to conduct a ground operation by Lebanese civilians who are Shiite in their affiliation and are part of Hezbollah will be highly rejected by the Lebanese, by the international community, and they know how it ends. Using Palestinians to do that, well, it's, the narrative that the Palestinians are refugees from Israel, so they are in a part of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It's not Lebanese preemptively or deliberately attacking Lebanon. It's a kind of a Palestinian issue.
A continuation of the Gaza
Yeah.
war in the northern front.
Yeah, so that's not such a clever, in my idea, such a clever solution. Is something that Nasrallah, before killed, promoted with the former leadership of Hezbollah. Although they are all vanished from the world, all of them destroyed, the trend of using Palestinian in order to rebuild capabilities against Israel that considered to be more legit in terms of international community, in terms of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, is something that they are trying to promote, by the way, not just in Lebanon, in the Syrian front also.
Right. And all these strikes are happening while Israel and Lebanon are supposedly in a ceasefire agreement that Trump was very proud of. What does strike mean for the ceasefire agreement? Is it still, in effect? How do you see it going forward?
Well, we are accused by the international community as violating the ceasefire, and it is being counted. The numbers are rising on a daily basis, how Israel keeps on violating the agreement. Israel, from its side, counts as well the violation done by Hezbollah, because according to the agreement, Hezbollah should disarm, not just in southern Lebanon, all across. So any attempt of Hezbollah to regroup, to rearm, is a violation of the ceasefire, and Israel responds. The problem is that if you look at that from external position, it seems like the only violations are conducted by Israel because it's more obvious, more blunt. More,
you see bombs.
You see something happening, and the violation from the Hezbollah side are silent, something concealed for the general opinion. Secondly, there are huge things that are going on in the intelligence level, which are strictly violating the ceasefire. And Israel sees that. You can't really share that with the international community. You can't really publish it because it's sensitive intelligence, and Israel responds to that. So that is why seems to be the more warmongers, the destabilization element of the agreement. It's not the case, and whoever knows all of the information know that most of Israeli action in the northern part are a response to violation beneath the surface done by Hezbollah and Hamas.
And maybe that's why we don't see the Lebanese government, shaming Israel or denouncing this ceasefire, because they understand it's first of all a response, and also in their interest to maintain this agreement.
Formally, of course, they do. There are few statements done by officials of Lebanon denouncing that activities and criticizing Israel, and of course in the international platform. But I think deep down they know that diminishing the power of Iran in Lebanon and crippling the military capabilities of Hezbollah, supporting the stabilization of the state of Lebanon. Theoretically, they know that without Hezbollah, if they could just somehow disappear, Lebanon will be a different state, flourishing, prosperous. They know that. So they won't say that, God forbid, that Israel is helping them. But deep down inside, they know that's not against the Lebanese interest, that Iran will be blocked out and Hezbollah will be diminished in power.
And this ceasefire is part of several achievements that President Trump is very proud of. He said that he's ending wars all across the world. And maybe the epitome of this effort by President Trump was in the inaugural meeting of the Board of Peace that took place last week in the United States. And Trump spoke at length about the UN and how the Board of Peace will maybe oversee the UN and help the UN get better. But in the meantime, it seems like the Board of Peace is some sort of a replacement to the UN. We saw tens of leaders of countries, foreign ministers, one FIFA president. What is the capabilities and intentions of this body as much as we know?
I think that President Trump is doing a mistake by labeling the Board of Peace as something superior to the United Nations. The legitimacy of the Board of Peace is that its formulation is driven from a National Security Council resolution. So it gets their authority from the UN. And that is why, that's the source of legitimacy worldwide. And flipping it over and considering as an entity above the United Nations will eventually block or diminish the motivation of European countries and others to join in. And for no reason, because I think fundamentally they support the idea of peace, broadening the peace, solving confrontation all across the world. It's not something that most European countries will object to, but this kind of positioning the entities is not helpful, and I think it's for not good reason, and I hope that it will stop. Secondly, the Board of Peace should be focused on mission-oriented topics and not generally idea of values, okay? Because otherwise it replaces the United Nations.
No, and they talked about it in the meeting. We are doers while the UN is speakers.
I'm all for it. Go ahead and do, but make the difference in your capabilities of operational activities on the ground, on areas of conflict, which in those areas, the United Nations, it's much more complicated and harder to achieve their goals. So we have the major conflict in Sudan, the greatest catastrophe of the human catastrophe in the 21st century. Solve that problem. We have a problem in Gaza. Let's go ahead and solve that. We have problems other places in Europe. Let's solve that. Mission-oriented, focus on achieving the goals. That's the way. And if they will do that, they will get the support of all of the world. Right now, the labeling is problematic.
And one thing that maybe is similar between the Board of Peace and the UN is disagreements. Even in the first meeting, we saw, just on the topic of Israel and the Palestinians, we saw very different approaches from state leaders. Some, mostly Arab and Muslim states, voiced their support for the Palestinians and said that they're doing what they're doing to help the Palestinians. On the other hand, the leaders of Albania and Paraguay said that and Argentina, of course, said they're there to support Israel. What is the balance of power in terms of Israeli interests inside the Board of Peace, and what can we expect when all these powers are in play?
I think that Israel should be very much concerned in Gaza. The Board of Peace is part of the Day After in Gaza plan, which I totally support personally. It's the way to this. It is seems the credible way to remove Hamas out of its power there. It's crucial. It's crucial. It's still time is passing and they are still controlling Gaza, half of Gaza.
And getting stronger.
Getting stronger. We are just losing time. Any day that this technocratic committee and the Board of Peace is not active in Gaza, it's a waste of time. Hamas is benefiting from that. So we should be very, very focused on that. Let's get to the next stages in the 20 points plan. We have huge obstacles, huge challenges and tests that we're going to face. Let's focus on achieving them. The main of them is the fully disarmament of Hamas. It's behind the corner, and we are postponing the friction right now and and avoiding the test, avoiding whether it's applicable, and that's one of the problems. So that should be us. And it seems like there are other ambition on a very broader agenda, and I'm not sure that in the Israeli context to broaden the spectrum of the Board of Peace.
So, unlike other countries, Israel was not represented by neither its president, the head of state, President Herzog, or its prime minister, Benjamin Netanyahu. It sent a very respectable delegate, Foreign Minister Gideon Saar, but it stood up when we looked at that table at the Board of Peace. Most of the people were heads of states. And I think it was also reflected in the speeches of the American representatives at the board. They talked about Qatar, about Kazakhstan, about different countries, and completely ignored Israel because it was not represented by a very senior delegate. What do you think this means for how Israel views itself in the Board of Peace and how the United States maybe views Israel's role in the Board of Peace?
Well, there is a little bit confusion and perplexity in Israel's position. From the international spectrum, personally, Benjamin Netanyahu is now among Arab states, no matter what they are saying behind the scenes, because of his reputation in the general public opinion of their state, is considered to be toxic. They would have severe problems internally, Arab states, if they will
Also Europe.
be, or if they will be somehow connected to him personally. Behind the scene, by the way, it's a totally different issue.
Yeah.
But this formal pictures taken, etc., the image is problematic.
So it was convenient for them that Saar represented Israel.
Yeah, Gideon Saar is less that.
The public doesn't know him in Arab states.
Exactly. Internally in Israel, it is also complicated because Qatar is highly debated. We have this huge Qatar gate that is strictly connected to Netanyahu, the Prime Minister's office. So imagine what would have happened if you would see him smiling, rubbing shoulders with Amir of Qatar. It will be disastrous in terms of internal Israeli politics and the
election year.
So from both sides, the interest of Trump and the interest of Netanyahu, it was better off that we were not represented by official. What it means on the long term, I think that we should really make the barrier between what's happening practically, operationally, behind the scene, and what is the image. It is two different, both of them are important, by the way. But I would concentrate on the real practicalities and what is happening on the ground.
And I want to end here with a forward-looking question. So there's no doubt that the inaugural meeting of the Board of Peace symbolizes maybe a move to a new phase in the Gaza reconstruction and rebuilding plan, and generally in the political solution that the United States and its president think this region should go towards. What can we expect in the short term, medium term, in the next few years?
Yeah, well, you are absolutely true. That ceremony should have planned to be a turning of the page. We are entering into the different story, another page in the ongoing book that writes itself in Gaza. And symbolically, three entities should enter Gaza in the very near future. The NCAG, which is the Technocratic Government of Gaza, Technocratic Committee, still in Egypt, still waits to enter. A force of a Palestinian policeman that will be deployed in the red area. Our listeners remember the red area controlled by Hamas. And
so they're supposed to compete with Hamas.
They're supposed to replace Hamas as law and order entity that preserves stability, security stability, and replaces Hamas. Yeah. And the ISF, the International Stabilization Force, consists of 5 donating countries that should be deployed in the green area, in the area controlled by Israel, and maintain law and order in that vast area of half of Gaza Strip. In order to do that's the next test. Why is it so fragile? Because there's a huge question that nobody knows. How will Hamas respond to the fact of Palestinian policemen entering the red zone? And how will the Israeli public opinion, mainly in the right wing of Israeli political spectrum, will understand or perceive the fact that the Palestinian policemen from the PA, basically that related to the Palestinian Authority, re-entering Gaza, which is something that they reject all through the war. And those 3 tests, the NCAG entering, the Palestinian policemen in the red area, and the ISF, is crucial for the disarmament of Hamas and entering to the next phase of reconstruction.
So I think we can end this episode by just a general statement that we need to give things time, that we need to wait to see how the negotiation go. If the US attacks Iran, if Hezbollah joins, we just generally need to wait and let time take its course. So thank you, Tamir.
Thank you.
And I see you next week.
Thank you.
And that is all for this week. Every week, we'll bring to you an episode with the most pressing events shaping Israel's national security. Please follow us on the INSS website or any platform you like to listen to your podcasts on. I want to thank our incredible podcast team, Ariel Nugrian, Omer Vixelbaum, and Shai Shachaf. See you next week on Brief.IL.